Armen, the EU says this is about putting the whole relationship with the UK on a far more positive footing. Is that the case?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly what EU officials have been saying, and we've obviously seen this sort of new tone over the last few months between Brussels and London. There's a lot more emphasis, I think, now on the UK and the EU sort of being part of the West, and the idea that they should jointly address the big issues of our day: Russia, China, Ukraine, obviously, Iran, climate change. It's not that that acknowledgement wasn't there during previous UK administrations, but it was more kind of grudging, that, yes, they're all part of the West, they should work together. Now I think there is that much more positive tone, and there is certainly an understanding that the Northern Ireland Protocol has been this big obstacle in the way of opening up that whole relationship so that they can really focus on these big picture issues. I think what's very interesting, what we should look out for, Annette, is if they do indeed announce a deal this afternoon, is that sort of the end of a process, or is it the start of something else? Because there's been speculation that Rishi Sunak might look into things like the EU Horizon programme to make British scientists more integrated with, their European counterparts, that he might look at integrating energy policy more with seabed interconnectors. But would all that start to look like sort of a reversal of Brexit to the Brexiters? So I think that's a kind of very interesting thing to watch, whether it's the end of something or the start of something more dynamic.
And as you were saying there, I mean, there's still many other negotiations that lie ahead, which are at the basis of this crucial relationship between the European bloc and Britain.
Absolutely. I mean, as well as considering what kind of new things the two blocs want to do, there's also the outstanding issues from the actual Brexit agreement itself. There's, just to name a couple of areas, fishing. There's a transition period which runs out in 2026. That sounds far away, but of course, negotiations have to start for something new to be in place by 2026. You've got financial services which are still ongoing. Those talks have not, reached any satisfactory solution. And for a country, the UK, that prides itself on its financial services sector, the fact that those services are so constrained by this, the current Brexit trade deal, that is something that has to be addressed. But I think more broadly, Annette, if we look at countries that are on the European continent but not in the EU, they're constantly having to respond to whatever the EU is doing, to adapt and to sometimes actually negotiate with the EU. I mean, Switzerland, which is not in the EU, until recently it was in talks for 7 years with Brussels about free movement of people, about state aid, level playing field, all of these things. When the EU updates its energy policy, Norway has to pay attention because of its oil industry. Iceland has to adapt its fishing industry sometimes. Liechtenstein is always looking at what Switzerland is doing. So there's no real end to updating the relationship with Brussels if you're outside the EU.
It is indeed an ongoing process. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's our Europe editor, Armen Georgian.